My first time at the Kyiv Security Forum, as it is for many of us. And I have on stage Ambassador Paul Jones, a distinguished fellow at the Center of European Policy Analysis, Bill Monahan, who's a fellow at CEPA, and Frédéric Petit, who is a member of the National Assembly of France. And what we're going to be talking about is the future of America and what U.S. leadership means now. So I have warned the panelists that I'm going to kick off with a lightning round question. As this panel is taking place around the time of Victory Day, it's worth remembering that an isolationist America did not want to join in World War II. It was reluctant. So my question to you is, what can convince Trump that Putin can't be trusted and that U.S. intervention is key to keeping Russia in check? Paul, if you could start.
Lightning round? Quick answer? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for the invitation and great to see everyone here. It's my first time at the Kyiv Security Forum. Democracies, as we know, react slowly. There's a lot of ups and downs. We see that with a new administration coming in and I think learning some of the lay of the land on something that looked maybe easy at the outset. Doesn't look so easy now. But I don't think the U.S. is suffering from isolationism right now. I think the U.S. is finding its way in a dramatically changing world. And I think our president is more, I would call him sort of selective engager. He's very selective in where he wants to engage, but he's willing to engage quite forcefully in those areas and hard to predict. I'll leave it there because it's a lightning round.
Sounds great. I'm going to leave our French colleague for last. And Bill, what do you think?
Yes, okay, thank you. And I want to begin by thanking the Kyiv Security Forum and the Center for European Policy Analysis for having this panel. I would say that President Trump is someone who wants to experience things firsthand. And so what you're seeing is many of his colleagues, I believe, on the Hill, the Republican side on the Hill, have their doubts. They're skeptical that President Trump can reach a deal, but they're willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, and they're willing to let this play out for a while. At the same time, you're seeing some movement by the Republicans to set some guardrails on where those talks may go. So you're seeing the Senator Graham's bill on Russian sanctions in case the Russians do not engage in good faith negotiations. And I think there's more to it, but let me just leave it there, and hopefully we can return to that later in the discussion.
Frédéric.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. First of all, I would like to precise something because we have I am a strange member of French Parliament because I'm elected by French diaspora. My constituency is the French people living abroad in Germany, Central Europe and Europa. I am living in Poland since decades. And then I may have sometimes some view a little original for a French member of Parliament. You came back to the war, and I would say that leadership of America for the General de Gaulle was something to discuss anytime, and I would say that I'm in this kind of things. What is worrying me now is not who will be leader, because I am a French Democrat. I am rather keen to discuss what means leadership when we are attacked by imperialism, leadership and sovereignty and so on. We have to be careful. What is worrying me now is rather that I am not sure that we are attacking elites, and we're attacking academic. And for me, I think that maybe we are losing some key to understand the world. I think that before making diplomacy, before trying to change the world, you have to understand it. And I'm not sure that you can understand the world saying that Gaza is a desert. Gaza, it's the oldest town of the world. Okay, then I would like maybe to make a signal for that it's not a problem of leadership, it's not a problem of what Trump wants to do, and he has the right to go in this way. The United States have the right to get a little distance with what we have to do in Europe. But my worry is about we have to go on discussing about the real things and the real history and the reality of the things. And then we need to have leaders, as you asked in the panel, which are understanding what we are talking about.
So to pick up off of what you're saying that the way Trump perceives the world is unlike past U.S. leaders. And one of the examples you're giving is Gaza, where he's come in not recognizing their right to the territory or their commitment to the territory. He just sees it a different way. And to apply that to Russia, we've seen him come in initially. We've all heard the comments where he talked about Vladimir Putin as someone he had felt a kinship with because they had both gone through the slings and arrows of the Russia investigation. And now we're seeing an evolution to him saying Putin wants peace, to tweeting for him, which is a big thing, Vladimir, stop. Well, so are we seeing the education of Donald Trump in real time?
Yes, you know, it's a big part of my job is to control the French government. I will not try to control the American government. But I would say that I'm not talking about Gaza as I didn't take the Gaza as a strategy for Gaza or not for Gaza and so on. You cannot understand Gaza saying that Gaza is a desert. Gaza is the oldest Orthodox church in the world.
At least it was.
You have to know
damaged,
that.
Yes.
Okay, Ukraine is the oldest. Sometimes I'm saying that the Republic of Two Nations was the one grandmother of the European Union. Then I think there are things that you have to keep in mind. That you cannot simplify and you cannot make 240 signs to explain the world. It's a little too short. And that's my worry now, okay? We can discuss with anybody which we don't agree with me. I have no problem with that. But we have to talk about what the world is. And the world is a little complex now, especially in this region, for example, which is you have 4 languages, 3 religions. It's a complex region here. And what is the Ruski Mir, what is the Ukrainian history, what is the Republic of Two Nations, and so on. Okay, but you have to bear that in mind correctly, and then we can discuss. Even if we don't agree, it's, you know, only in the cemetery everybody is agreed.
Yeah. Paul, in the first Trump administration, we saw Trump similarly friendly towards Putin, and then they had a parting of the ways when it came to Assad in Syria, when Assad gassed his own people. And that was one of, for Trump, one of the times that he finally started getting, this guy isn't working together with us. Today, or at least in the past 24 hours, we've had Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent say in testimony, yes, Vladimir Putin is a war criminal. Are we seeing the administration pivot in a way that could transform them back into a leader in this fight?
Well, first I'd say, President Trump obviously has a unique view of the world and the U.S. global role to be played out. As he says, he operates on gut, on instinct, on understanding the needs of that particular moment. And then I think you see other people in his administration who build strategies and policies around that, which can change quite rapidly depending on how President Trump then maybe changes his view of the situation. So I think it's hard to take any particular moment and extrapolate what is the general overgoing long-term strategy of President Trump. I do think that, I mean, we can look back at previous U.S. presidents who had their own, views of President Putin that were completely inconsistent with what they would say today. You know, we had George W. Bush look into his soul. We had President Obama wanting a reset.
Yes, but they were each burned and said so after those initial bursts of hopefulness.
Yeah. In the current context, I think President Trump's desire to integrate Russia, and I don't think it's changed by any particular thing. I think President Trump does want to integrate Russia into the European and global security system, and as was mentioned earlier, could potentially try to do that through the G7 in 2027 when the U.S. leads that. That, I think, is an aberration in where U.S. politics is now, as was mentioned earlier. I don't think that, I think that a future president would not be engaging President Putin that way, just on the basis of past experience, as you mentioned.
Bill, do you see some positives in Trump's view of the world, that he has come in and talked positively about autocracies and reaching out to both Russia and China? Is there, to red team it, is there an upside?
I don't see an upside to talking positively about autocracies. I do think that what you may be seeing is either a White House perspective that is looking for a big deal to be signed, something historic. And you can think back to the 80s when, even at the height of the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union were engaged in arms control and were able to reach agreement. My feeling is there's kind of three things in the way, and it's Putin, Putin, and Putin. He saw the collapse of the Soviet Union as the greatest disaster of the 20th century. He's not a Gorbachev-like figure, and looking to address the country's problems diplomatically, or at least to at least make the compromises that would be necessary to do that. And so I feel that while we shouldn't avoid engaging with Russia, at the same time, we need to be very realistic about who we're dealing with and the system that we're dealing with under Putin.
Still, we come back to that question that I kicked off with about, the U.S. was reluctant to get involved in World War II, and there was a campaign to educate them, including the British Prime Minister coming in his ghillie suit and coming to the White House. So how do you convince Trump that he needs to fulfill that role, that this isolationism that he's expressing, or that his vice president expresses, is damaging to European alliances, and that that's somehow damaging to the U.S.? Is there a way in? Because at least both of the Americans on the stage, you've had to work in successive administrations and make arguments to people regardless of their party. So how would you sell him? Jump in.
All right. I think there are a couple of ways in, and we've seen a couple of examples of that. Obviously, President Trump comes from the world of business. He looks to business deals. The critical minerals agreement, as discussed previously, is something that gives him a sense that there's an ability to reap a return on investment in assisting Ukraine. Whether that'll actually turn into future U.S. support in terms of weapons to Ukraine, we'll have to see, but at least it leaves that avenue open. I think there's an opportunity in a couple of opportunities. One is reframing Ukraine in the sort of the body political and popular mind in the United States in a way that I think would be more interesting to President Trump. And it's reframing it in a way that I think is reality today, and that it is no longer about Ukraine being what was the narrative in the United States was very much from the outset. Ukraine was a victim of invasion, obviously, and needed our help. Today we see Ukraine, as has been discussed in previous panels, as a very powerful, the largest military in Europe now, and highly capable, and able to help secure Europe, and therefore impact U.S. interests in reducing, and President Trump's interest in reducing the U.S. troop deployment and commitments to Europe. Putting Ukraine in the frame of a contributor that we can learn from. It's fighting a peer competitor of the United States that is not, which the United States hasn't done since World War II. Obviously, we've talked about that earlier, but also as a fundamental part of European security. I think that's a different frame. It can, in business terms, it can be portrayed as Ukraine as a, instead of a cost center, sort of a profit center with small amounts of U.S. investment can yield, results in a peace for strength sort of frame. I think that's one opportunity, and I think another opportunity would be at the perhaps, and there are better experts on NATO in this room than I, but I think if European NATO members can outline for President Trump at the summit a timeline and plan for acquiring the unique capabilities that the military capabilities that the United States has, both for European and Ukrainian security, such that it's clear that over time Europe will become less dependent on the United States in a way that's easy to understand. So
that there's an off-ramp for U.S. aid that President Trump can see in the future.
And that could be a foundation for an exchange that also has been mentioned earlier. Europe continues to buy U.S. equipment, but the United States continues to provide these unique capabilities until those times when they can be taken over by European countries.
And if I may, to say back to you what I think I heard about the minerals deal, you're suggesting to Ukrainians that rather than feel like they've been blackmailed into giving up their mineral wealth in order to get security guarantees as they are facing this aggression, that this is an opportunity to because Trump sees the world through the lens of business. This is an opportunity to be on equal footing with him and create a relationship going forward that he has a commitment to.
Yeah, I think he's got skin in this game. And as I say, it's a path. If he wanted to transfer equipment to Ukraine, he could say, hey, I don't do it like my predecessor did it, where I just give it. We're going to get this back later in terms of, profits from critical minerals in Ukraine. But for now, we're advancing this equipment.
Which, of course, sells well with the MAGA audience back home. Bill, you
I just to kind of footstomp Paul's point, which I think is an excellent one. The critical minerals agreement does kind of align with kind of the Trump view of the world. The other thing it does, I think, is create political space for kind of the transatlantic supporters in Congress, I'm thinking in the Senate in particular, to be able to say, we support assistance to Ukraine. Now we can support it consistent with the way President Trump sees the world. So I think it gives political cover to congressional advocates in the Senate, in the House, to be able to channel a fund, either at least deliver assistance to Ukraine. How it gets paid for is really kind of, I think, one of the cruxes of the matter.
Frederick, how is this renegotiation of the U.S. role going over in Europe?
I will maybe have another way to see that. First of all, the panel is about United States. It's not about Trump, and I would be maybe less transactional and more about value. I believe in the leadership of United States, independent of who is president, because they are a big democracy. And for me, the solution of the chaos on the 21st century will be democratic, or we will all die. For me, it's clear. then US are a big democracy, then they will have a leadership. I think that's my answer. Now to come back about what I would say to convince, I think that the full-scale invasion gave very clear and very concrete differences of what are our democratic values. Lavrov said, to justify the invasion, well, if the Wallon should have a problem with the Flamand, everybody will understand that the French people will take the military means to defend French minority in Belgium. Everybody is laughing. It's stupid. It's Ruski Mir. It's Francuski Mir like Ruski Mir. We are not that. We are not that. Language, the language is not a determinist. Language is a liberty. And a nation is not made by God, is not made by a language, is not made by where I am born, is made because I am a citizen. Okay? In our democracy, citizens are fighting. Citizens are fighting. We are not allowing somebody to have a weapon if it's not a citizen. And Russia are fighting with North Korean, with prisoners, with commerçants which are going in Africa, they are taking the mines. We cannot go on with this guy. It's not our word. It's clear. We see the difference. I don't want my children to live in a world where you are determined because you are speaking this language or this one. No. I remind you that in Europe, and it's not a kind of degraded way. It was a choice in the 90s when we got this Polish, we were speaking awful language and so on and so on. We decided to have 24 official languages. 24. Every time there is a directive, we have 24 languages. We need, and that is, I would say that, we want this democratic world, and we are fighting with people, obviously saying that, and since 2 months, more obviously, they don't want to live in our world. Then we have not to attack, but we have to defend ourselves. Please help us.
And that kind of multi-layered thinking in favor of democracy is the kind of thing that isn't often articulated in the Oval Office right now. We're just about out of time, but for our 2 American former officials on the stage, do you think the best way to Trump is through the lens of business, or do you think he will understand what our French colleague has just said? Do you think he will eventually champion democracy? Yeah.
I think it's going to be a question of, different voices within the American society reaching out to him. For instance, there's polling in America showing that almost 80% of Americans view Putin as the aggressor, as the cause of the fighting in Ukraine. There's a majority that supports military assistance to Ukraine. When Trump sees these kinds of voices, hears them from Congress, hears from also, I would add, defense industry as a potential voice that might have something to say on assistance and integration with our European allies. I think that accumulation of voices can have an impact.
It'll get through. Paul, do you have the same confidence?
Well, it's a long, to truly address your question would take much longer. I would simply say that, President Trump clearly engages all comers sort of on an equal basis, democratic or autocratic. And the different policy approaches to a democracy, you know, are things that come from our entire political system, as Bill was outlining. You know, there are some strengths to being comfortable with and engaging autocrats, because there is need for that. There's opportunities for reducing, you know, potential for war. But I think, you know, the United States, the character of the United States, the democracy, the values will always be present, and I don't think it's in big danger. So thank you very much.
Thank you. From your mouth to God's ear. With that, thank you, gentlemen. Thanks to SIPA.